Hello, everyone. This is Gail and Jeremiah wishing you a happy National Dog Day. We are so glad to be with you today, even though Jeremiah prefers to have a nap, which he'll get back to here in a minute. But we just wanted to say hello to everyone and just thank you for joining us today on this special event day. Not only is it National Dog Day, but my new book, Love Takes Flight, launches in paperback form today. So I am just really pleased to share some things with you about the book and about why National Dog Day is special to me. So let me get Jeremiah back to his nap. And hello again. Me without Jeremiah. He's going to go to his little doggy bed that he loves so much and that a friend of ours gave to us a couple of years ago when she sadly moved away. But we keep her in our thoughts and our hearts with that special dog bed whenever Jeremiah lays on it, as well as other times. So just a little bit of background for those of you who don't know about me. I am a sweet contemporary romance writer, and I started that journey about 6 years ago with my first book called Rescue Road. And I have continued that series, which is set in the greater Yellowstone area of Montana and Wyoming. And then today's book that I'm going to talk to you a bit about, that we're launching in the paperback form, is not part of that series, but still the same type of theme. And that is sweet contemporary romance that weaves pet rescue and adoption. And I call it my Pet Rescue Romance series. I've actually been a writer for more than 30 years, actually closer to 35. But I started off in a little town called Stevensville, Montana, which is south of Missoula, as a reporter for a mom and pop newspaper that had started just the year before that. And then later I graduated to being a reporter at the West Yellowstone News, right next to Yellowstone National Park in West Yellowstone, Montana, which gave me that extra exposure to the beautiful Yellowstone National Park. And within 6 months of being the reporter, I became the editor. So baptism by fire, so to speak. But the editor previous, the one I worked under as the reporter, he and his wife had moved, or did move, from West Yellowstone, and so I was asked if I wanted to step in, and I said sure. The 60-hour weeks, 60-hour weeks became 80 as the editor, but it was a wonderful experience, and I continue freelance writing for newspapers and magazines. So, in addition to my authorship, that is my writing life, so to speak. So, anyway, but I just love sharing stories. So whether it's for magazines, newspapers, or in book format, my desire is to entertain as well as educate and inspire. That's kind of my mantra, so to speak. So getting back to sweet contemporary romance, as I said, I started about 6 years ago. It was my first release, which is called Rescue Road. And then after that was a book called Finding Love at Compassion Ranch. And those are set in what is known as the greater Yellowstone area, Montana. It does also include Idaho. I'll probably do an Idaho book one day. Anyway, Montana and Wyoming is primarily where they're set. And this story, Love Takes Flight, which, as I said, launches today in paperback form, is also a pet rescue romance story, but it is not part of that series. This takes place north of Missoula in an area that's actually known as the Mission Mountain Valley, and I have called it the Merritt Valley, Merritt Mountains, but it is based on that area basically between Missoula and Kalispell. Beautiful, beautiful area, the Mission Mountains, and the valley is very verdant. There are several rivers and streams, and those play a part in the story as well. But so let me tell you just a little bit about how that book started. It started actually as a submission for an anthology. Get a load of the thickness of this book. There are 6 authors, 6 different stories in this, and I am thankfully one of them. And my friend Michelle Camp, she invited me to join in if I wanted to share a story. And so I did, and it was accepted. And I thank both Michelle and the other authors for letting me be part of this. But my story in this book is called Rescue My Heart. If you can kind of see that there. And the objective was to raise money for a charity. And I was very honored to be part of that. We're also going to be doing a holiday stories, Christmas stories, Thanksgiving stories for charity as well, coming up later this year. But so Rescue My Heart became Love Takes Flight, and that released in ebook form earlier this month, and in paperback it is released today. So what I want to do is share a little bit from the book. But what happened between the charity romance and the book here is we were selling the charity book as well as ebook for most of the summer. And then once the sales ended for that, because it was just a limited time, then we authors could take our story from the charity anthology and turn it into our own books if we wanted to. So that's what I did. And I renamed it because you can probably see up here, Sandhill Cranes in Flight. They play a very vital role in the whole story, as you will hear as I read to you from the first chapter here. So this is chapter 1 from Love Takes Flight. Eleanor Davis sat on a plaid quilt among the tall tan grasses of a hillside within the Merritt Valley National Wildlife Refuge. The large pond below her vantage point rippled, and the marsh cattails dipped their brown heads as a light breeze tickled the landscape. The early May morning brought the need for the gray fleece jacket and leather gloves she wore. Mist rose from the wetlands, creating an added chill. Eleanor shuffled her body and turned the collar up on her jacket before placing binoculars to her face for the third time. She fixed the lens across the pond to observe a pair of sandhill cranes feeding in another swampy area. The taller male's long beak prodded the wet ground, and the female next to him waded farther into the water. The shadow of a hawk caused the red-headed male crane to raise his long neck toward the sky and produce a rancorous call. Upon spying the soaring hawk, the male jumped from side to side, extending his wings as if challenging the bird of prey. The female, smaller in stature, trotted back to her mate, picked up a small stick, and, while tossing it in the air, flapped her 3-foot-long gray wings. "Cool," Eleanor whispered. "You tell him, cranes." She then trained her binoculars to the sky and watched a sharp-shinned hawk, its blue-gray feathers distinct in the early morning light. She watched it dip and soar as it searched for breakfast. "Granddad, you'd have loved seeing this," she said in a low voice. Another crane call, this one closer, reverted Eleanor's attention from the raptor. She used the binoculars to scope out the marsh below her viewing point. The glasses captured the image of a second pair of cranes and also a nearby structure that resembled a beaver's lodge. Eleanor slid off the quilt and haphazardly folded the covering. With binoculars hanging around her neck, she duck-walked toward the structure. However, the cranes seemed to sense her presence. The pair began jumping, flapping their wings, and emitting distress noises. She paused, hoping the birds would not take flight. After they seemed to settle down and return to foraging, Eleanor continued her stealth upon the structure. She leaned against the left side of the camo fabric-crafted tent. "Must be a former duck blind," she muttered. She took up the binoculars once again, peered around the corner. She focused the lens on the nearby cranes. She noted the research bands attached to the right legs of the birds. Eleanor grinned and whispered, "Oh, Granddad, the second pair is back. Her excited murmurings must have been louder than she thought, for the sandhills began to squawk, and within a moment a cacophony chorused from the farther shore. "I hope you plan to stay put for a while and let the cranes settle down," muttered a male voice from inside the camouflage tent. Eleanor squealed and took 2 steps back. The cranes' bugle calls rose from the marsh, and the 2 closest to the structure hopped, then took a short flight farther away. They landed in a grassy area above the pond. "I think you've disturbed the birds enough this morning," the graveled voice declared. Stationed inside the bird blind, Nathan Ford hoped his low tone emitted authority. "Either get in here or move on," he commanded the intruder. "Either way, please do it quietly." Nathan adjusted his video equipment and surveyed the spot where the cranes landed. A moment later, the tent's entrance flapped, and Nathan, dressed in his heavy U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service coat, took a step back. A moment later, he was face to face with a woman bundled in a gray fleece jacket. Her olive eyes stared into his gray ones. Neither spoke for a moment, and then she said in a hushed tone, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone was here, other than the cranes. I took this for an abandoned duck blind." "It is," Nathan responded. He then pointed to the emblem on his down jacket, indicating his work with the governmental agency. "Now it serves as a study site," he said. He nodded toward the video camera to his right. "I'm attempting to find out if this particular pair of cranes will nest on the refuge again this year." "So they are the ones who came last spring and summer." The woman's excited, hopeful voice caught him by surprise. "Yeah, you know these birds?" The woman nodded. "My grandfather and I saw them about this time last year, and off and on we'd come to the refuge during the summer to see if they stayed. We were happy to learn they did." Nathan smiled and relaxed his posture. "It's an exciting time. We haven't had more than 1 pair stay on the refuge for several years." He held out his hand. "Nathan Ford, supervisory biologist." The woman's eyes widened. "Nathan, really?" Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know who I am." "I'm Eleanor Davis. Ellie. I believe you knew my grandfather." Instantly, Nathan's thoughts traveled back, recalling the time spent at the Davis farm. From his early days as a biologist and purchasing apples and cherries from the elderly couple, then a few years later, adding vegetables and herbs to his acquisitions, to the more recent times as he helped Cal create a small vineyard and construct a larger greenhouse. "Wow, well, this is a surprise." The woman's voice brought Nathan back to the present. "Granddad spoke about you a lot, especially after you helped him with the greenhouse and the vineyard." The smile she gave him caused the guilt Nathan thought he had buried to resurrect like a prairie flower in spring. I couldn't attend Cal's funeral," he stammered. I was out of town at the time." The smile did not leave Eleanor's face. "I understand," she said. He stared at her. How could she know? "Government meetings, conferences, travel, I get all that. I used to work for the National Park Service," she said. "I loved my job, but I sure don't miss all those meetings and travel." Nathan sighed. "Yeah, well, there is that." He turned and picked up the video camera. "Let's see if I can get a bit more of the bird's behavior before I have to pack up." Nathan reset the device on the small stand built to hold the camera and zoomed in on the sandhills, now sauntering amid the growing grasses. He took a deep breath. He had been able to keep his struggle from most people. Few knew his real reason for missing the old man's funeral, and he intended to keep it that way. So there's secret number 1. Kind of a secret anyway. Something that he doesn't really want to share with Ellie, and for those of you who either have already got the book or might want to purchase the book, you'll find out a bit later Ellie has her own challenge from her past that Nathan finds out about, and that kind of causes some of those conflicts that we find in sweet romance or any romance story. There's supposed to be a conflict and drama and things like that. Kind of if you've ever watched Hallmark movies or read Hallmark stories, there's that drama and conflict that pulls the couple apart, and then something happens to weave them back together, and that all takes place in my book as well. So what I just read to you, as I said, was from chapter 1. It's what we call in the romance writing industry the meet cute. So where they meet, and it's supposed to be kind of a cute little way that they meet. No matter what type of trope, which is kind of like the theme. You've probably heard of enemies to lovers, sorry about that, or friends to lovers, the secret baby, and in my case, it's, two people who had never met but have a connection. And there's different ways that the couples meet in a love story or a romance book. And I wanted something unique, not just, I can think of like where a woman was driving and hit a guy who was crossing the street and he loses his memory, or vice versa. I think there's been ones about that. Or meet at a coffee shop, or he's a billionaire that needs a nanny for his children from his first marriage, or something like that. But I wanted something unique and that spoke to what the story kind of revolves around, which is their love for nature. They have the connection of Ellie's grandparents. She used to work for the Park Service. He works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so conservation. So different things that they would have in common, and do have in common, and then have them meet in a cute way over sandhill cranes. Who would have thought? But for those of you who don't know, sandhill cranes mate for life, so that kind of makes a neat background story for this particular story. And then I also have worked for an organization that helps to save endangered species, particularly cranes, and it's called the International Crane Foundation. I worked there for one summer. It's located in Wisconsin, north of Madison, and it was just very, very enjoyable, educational for me to learn about all the different species of sandhill cranes found in the world. This place has at least one pair of every species of cranes, and sandhills are among those. And so whether I've been in Yellowstone or near Yellowstone, or even here in central Wyoming where I live, we can see, and I have seen, sandhill cranes. And I just find them to be amazing, amazing animals. So even on the cover, you can see I have a pair of where are they? Right there. A pair of sandhill cranes. You'll also see that I have a dog and a cat, and kind of a farm setting, but also with mountains around. This kind of simulates the area that I mentioned where this takes place, north of Missoula and south of Kalispell in Montana, in a beautiful valley. And so there are farms there, there are ranches there. It's very verdant. It has a lot of green, as you can also see in my cover picture here, but also has the mountains around. And so I was very fortunate to be able to get those different elements onto my cover to kind of help tell the story. And so, but those sandhill cranes definitely play an important role throughout the book, really. So, and also pet rescue and adoption, well, animal rescue and adoption. So the collie that you see here, there's a story, a couple of stories really, about why I chose a collie. And also she adopts 2 cats as well, so there's a cat represented there. And then other farm animals become part of her farm, from lambs and goats to donkeys and horses. And so they all are part of what becomes and is Ellie's farm after the passing of her grandfather. So let me read another little chapter, another little part. This will show not only the adoption of some of these animals, but also some of the conflict and drama that happens between Ellie and Nathan due to, in essence, her parents. And so that's another part of the conflict and drama in this particular romance story. But all romances have that element of will they stay together, will they won't. And in part, this conflict is due to, I won't say meddling, but definitely due to her parents and something that took place before this particular chapter. So this is toward the end of the book when Ellie and her cousin, who is staying with her, Madison, add more animals to the farm. That evening, Ellie and Maddie met the truck and trailer that ambled into the driveway. They heard the lambs baa, the donkeys bray, and the goats bleat from inside the long livestock trailer. They smiled at one another despite the commotion. They're finally here. Ellie's excitement appeared contagious, for Maddie commented, "Ooh, I can't wait to see them in person. I hope that noise means they're happy." Ellie chuckled, probably at least happy the truck and trailer are not moving anymore. Maddie laughed. "I imagine so." "I'm glad Mr. Flanagan agreed to let the lambs be transported with the donkeys and goats," Ellie said. "That way we get them all at the same time." "And they're all here now," Maddie commented. The truck driver leaped from the cab. "Hi, ladies. Hope you're ready for these munchkins. Not easy getting them over those mountain passes on that 2-lane highway." "Yeah, those twists and turns can be tricky, even without a livestock trailer," Ellie said. "We're glad you're here and that Angels Rescue hired you to bring the animals to us. We're also glad that you were able to bring the lambs from Mr. Flanagan's place. Each of these animals will have a wonderful home with us." "All the stalls are ready," Maddie added. "We got them completed last Saturday." The mention of that work day and the troubles that came thereafter hit Ellie hard. Tears misted her eyes and she looked away. After blinking several times and composing herself, she looked at the driver and asked, "Do they have halters or do I need to gather some?" "Halters are already on. Connie said you can keep them, by the way. So did Mr. Flanagan." Ellie nodded. "That's very generous. Okay, let's get these critters settled in. Grace and Abby will be thrilled to have new neighbors and friends." By the way, Grace and Abby are horses that are already on the farm. Ellie and Maddie began to follow the driver to the back of the trailer. Ellie paused when an alert came from her phone. She dug the cell out of the back pocket of her jeans to find a text from her mother. "Not now," she mumbled, and placed the cell phone back into the pocket. Another beep. She ignored it and walked to the back of the trailer. Maddie looked at her. "Everything okay?" "Just Mom. I'll read her text later." "You sure?" By the way, Maddie is Madison, her cousin, who's staying with her. "Oh yeah," Ellie replied. "This day is too important to allow anything to spoil it." "Okay, ladies, meet your new charges, the driver announced. He swung open the large white metal door. A bunch of eyes gazed at Ellie and Maddie through the green gate across the back of the trailer. Both women grinned. "Oh heavens, they're adorable," Maddie said. Ellie reached her hand through the gate and toward the nearest lamb, a black female with a white furry forehead. She scratched the little ears and then rubbed the lamb's nose. Ellie's eyes surveyed the group that included 3 lambs, 3 pygmy goats, and 2 mini donkeys. She turned her attention to the small goats, one gray and white, another black and white, and the other caramel and white. Her heart softened from the blows of the past few days as she gazed at the animals. She stroked the head of the reddish brown and white goat and murmured, "Oh, so sweet." "I hope Connie told you that one's pregnant," the driver commented. Ellie nodded. "Twins," she said. "Yep, your herd will grow fast this year." "We're fine with that," Maddie responded. "We're already planning products like goat milk soap and lotion." "Lots of people like those things. Pretty big down in the Bitterroot," the man said. Well, let's get these animals to their new digs, shall we? Ellie's encouragement spurred Maddie to reach for the gate that covered the back end of the trailer. The driver blocked her path. "Let me, miss," he said. "These guys are more used to me. Best if I get them out and on the ground, one at a time." Maddie nodded and stepped back, just as Ellie's phone buzzed again. Oh, good grief, she's persistent. Maddie looked at Ellie. "Well, you haven't spoken to her since—" She glanced at the driver. "Might want to see what she has to say." Ellie studied her cousin, then nodded and stepped to the side. Turning her back on Maddie and the driver, she checked the phone's screen. Seeing the call was from Nathan, Ellie hesitated. She took 2 more steps away, then answered. "I really can't talk now. The animals have arrived, and I need to help get them—" "Ellie, just listen to me real quick. I'm sorry. I was wrong, and I was out of line. I really want to talk to you." "Well, I'm not sure I want to talk to you," she responded. "Besides, I told you, this is not a good time. Give me a few days. Maybe when you get back from the Sweeney River Refuge. I asked Jason to take that assignment, starting tomorrow. I really want this to work out with you." Ellie didn't respond right away. "I don't know," she said finally. "I'm sorry, Ellie, really I am. If you'll let me explain, I have animals to take care of." She clicked off and turned around to see Maddie and the driver looking at her. She gave them a brief smile. "Let's get these guys and girls moved, shall we?" So you can feel the tension in there. You can sense her hesitation. And she really just wants to not deal with the trauma and drama from the few days before and focus on the animals she and her cousin are going to be taking care of. So, I wanted to weave in a little bit more of what I would call family saga. There's that connection between Ellie and her grandparents, particularly her grandfather, and of course Nathan has that connection as well. And so that would be something that would bring them together, but also family drama and trauma start to take them apart. And so that was just another element that I wanted to weave in there, because we are supposed to have drama and tension and conflict in our stories and even in romance. It kind of that, like I said before, will they stay together? Will they won't? And then comes a happily ever after. So I assure you there is a happily ever after at the end of the book, but there are still some things that come between them that they have to work out. So I thank you for joining me today. I wanted to really quickly tell you another reason why I wanted to launch the paperback on National Dog Day. As I showed you before, there's a collie in here. And I chose a collie for this particular story for 2 reasons. First of all, my mother had a collie when she was growing up on a farm in Iowa. So there's that connection. And the dog's name was Linda. I named my collie in this story Linda as well in honor of that. But also in Montana, where my parents live, and obviously where I used to live, several years ago there was what they called Camp Collie. And that was a rescue, not a rescue organization, but a dog rescue, where communities came together to help collies and shelties that were found like in a hoarding type of situation. And they were malnourished, they were sick, things like that. And so the animals were confiscated for a trial for cruelty and neglect. And so they stayed at the fairgrounds of this one small town in central Montana known as Stanford. And there was an old fairgrounds there. So the animals were taken there, and people came from different communities to help out, volunteering to take care of, walk, socialize, just help the dogs. And I believe there were 50 at the time that were part of this situation. So my parents and I actually got involved a little bit by stopping and volunteering with donating money and dog food and things like that. And that just really made an impact on me, not only the hoarding situation, but the way the communities, like 4 or 5 different communities, came together to help these animals as they were being held during the court case. All of them, from what I understand, were eventually adopted because these people were fined and they were found guilty and the animals were taken from them. So these dogs got a new life with kind people and loving homes. And so that Camp Collie resonated with me and is woven into one of the reasons why and how, Ellie gets this collie. And later on, she adds another dog to help the collie adjust, as well as adopts a couple of cats. And those cats are based on kitties that I know friends of ours that have a ranch have. And they are sweet, they are siblings, and so I put them in this book with change of names, of course. But Linda the collie is in honor of my mom's collie as a child named Linda. So anyway, so there's some different little tidbits and elements to this new book, Love Takes Flight, which again goes on sale as a paperback today. And I hope that you will consider purchasing, whether electronic version or paperback version. I will leave in the comments a link to be able to buy the books. They are going to be on sale starting today, whether it's ebook form or paperback, and that will go through the end of this month. And I donate a percentage of all my book sales to pet rescue organizations. So knowing that you are buying a book, whether for yourself or for a friend, and that part of your purchase price goes to help other animals in need, whether it's cats, dogs, horses, pigs, just about any type of animal. I'm wearing a pin today. I don't know if you can see it really well, but it's from Best Friends Animal Society, and that's one of the organizations that I support. They do take in all types of animals, dogs, cats, and as I said, pigs even, but goats, horses. So they are just a wonderful organization. If you've never heard of them, it's Best Friends Animal Society in southern Utah, outside of a small town called Kanab. I have visited there a couple of different times and volunteered there a couple of different times. I really love their work. And so I donate not only to them, but to other animal rescue organizations too. So once again, buy a book, help a pet in need, whether it's dogs, cats, horses, mini donkeys, pigs, whatever. So thank you for joining me, and thank you for being a supporter of indie authors and of pet rescue organizations. So I thank you once again, and have a great National Dog Day.